A veteran park ranger reached out to me once. He said, "Don't use my name. Don't say the park. Just tell it the way I told you." He wasn't after attention. He wasn't trying to sell a story. He just wanted it out of his head. He'd been working the same stretch of parkland for nearly 15 years. The kind of guy who can tell what animal passed by, just from the way the leaves are bent. He said the woods have a rhythm. The crickets, the birds, the wind through the trees. And when something doesn't belong, that rhythm breaks. That night, it broke hard. He was finishing a late patrol, running the perimeter road. The forest was quiet. No campers, no drunks, no trouble. Just miles of black pines and an old gravel path that looked silver under the moon. Then he heard something. Light steps crossing behind the truck. Not heavy like a bear, not cautious like a deer. Fast. Random, unhuman. He stopped the engine and waited. The air got thick, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. Then came a sound, a dry skitter, like claws or bones tapping on rock. It circled the truck once, slow, then stopped right above him. He swears the roof creaked, like something had climbed up there. He eased his door open and stepped out. No flashlight at first, just listening. He caught a faint smell in the air, dry and stale, like old paper. He finally flicked on his light and swept it across the hood. That's when he saw the handprint. It wasn't right. The fingers were too long, the spacing off. No clear palm, just thin lines pressed into the dust, like a spider tried to imitate a hand and didn't quite get it right. He raised the beam higher, slow and steady, and that's when he saw movement by the tree line, a white shape gliding low across the road. No sound of steps, just that awful skitter. It was thin, impossibly so, almost translucent under the light, long limbs bending the wrong way, and the head, it didn't turn right. The neck hung loose like it wasn't built to hold it up. He said the eyes were the worst part, big, black, and hollow. They didn't reflect light. They absorbed it, like two holes punched into the world. No blink, no shine, just depthless black. He froze. His instinct screamed to draw his sidearm, but he didn't. Something told him not to. He backed toward the truck and kept the light steady, talking under his breath like he would to a herd animal. "Easy. Easy now." The thing tilted its head, watching him. The slit where its mouth should have been twitched like it was trying to remember how to use it. Then suddenly it darted sideways. So fast the beam barely caught the blur. It dropped into the ditch, folding itself into the brush like liquid bone. He thought it was gone. Then his radio chirped. A quick, sharp burst of static, except this time it came back with an echo, like someone recorded his own radio and played it right back at him. The thing in the ditch stopped moving. He could hear the branches settling, but not breathing, not shifting, just waiting. The air smelled like dust again. He whispered into the radio, "Base, you copy?" But nothing answered. Only that faint echo repeating back a half-second later, warped and hollow. Then silence. He said it felt like standing inside someone else's lungs. Everything too still, too close. The forest around him, dead quiet. Even the insects stopped. He finally backed to the driver door, keeping the flashlight low. He never took his eyes off the ditch. And then he saw them. Two more black shapes just behind the first. Smaller, unmoving, watching. That's when he knew, whatever that thing was, it wasn't alone. He slid into the truck, started it up, and didn't look back. He said the moment his headlights hit them, all three dropped flat and vanished into the ground, like they'd never been there at all. He said the drive back felt longer than it ever had before. The radio stayed dead the entire way. No static, no voice, nothing. Just that empty hiss when he tried to key the mic. By the time he reached the service lot, he could still smell that dry paper scent clinging to his clothes. He sat in the truck for nearly 10 minutes before stepping out. He didn't file a report, not at first, because what do you even write down? Observed a tall white thing in the woods that can mimic radio signals? He'd be out of a job by morning, so he locked up the truck and walked the perimeter of the lot just to calm his head. The lights along the service road were still flickering from bugs smashing against them, the kind of normal noise that makes you feel safe. But when he got to the back gate, something clicked again. Same sound as before, that dry, skittering tap. He swung his light around fast and caught nothing. Just fence, trees, fog rolling in low. Whatever it was had followed him back. He went inside the ranger station and hit the logbook. He made a note for the morning shift, said he thought there might be an injured animal near the east loop, asked for a camera check on the perimeter. He didn't mention what he'd seen, but he couldn't stop thinking about those eyes. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he'd hear the radio chirp in his head, that double echo, and underneath it, he could swear he heard breathing that didn't belong to him. Next day, he went back out, broad daylight. He figured he'd prove to himself it was nothing. The forest looks different in the sun, safer, smaller, ordinary. He followed the same route, same gravel road, stopped by the ditch. That's when he saw the impression in the mud where it had folded itself down. Perfectly smooth, like something heavy with no bones had rested there and then lifted off clean. He put his hand over the print. It was cold. Not damp, not shaded, just cold. Like the ground itself didn't want to hold heat there anymore. A few yards away, he found something else. Scratches on a birch trunk. Parallel lines running upward, not sideways. Something had climbed, and halfway up, embedded in the bark, was a single pale sliver, like a fingernail, except thicker, porous. He pocketed it without thinking, slipped it into a plastic evidence bag when he got back. He said that night he kept it on his desk under a lamp. It looked harmless, just a bit of off-white keratin. But every so often when he looked away, he swore it shifted position. He even took a picture of it on his phone. The first shot came out normal. The second had a faint distortion, like heat waves across the lens. The third wouldn't save at all. Screen froze, then black. He deleted the file, unplugged the phone, and tossed it in his truck. The next morning, the nail was gone. He said nobody else went into that office. He was the only one with the key. He tore the place apart, checked under every folder, even the vent grates. Nothing. 2 nights later, a different ranger called in something strange over the radio. He said there were figures standing just beyond the tree line near the west campground. Tall, unmoving, white. Dispatch tried to respond, but his signal was choked with static. When they finally reached him 10 minutes later, he said the figures were gone, but he couldn't explain the tracks. Long lines pressed deep into the soft dirt, leading right toward his truck, then splitting apart into the trees. That's when the first ranger, my source, decided to come clean. He told his partner everything. The crawl on the roof, the eyes, the nail. He expected to get laughed at, but instead, his partner just nodded and said, "Yeah, I've seen them too." He said it like it was the weather, like it wasn't even a question anymore. That's when he realized this wasn't new. Whatever was out there, it had been for a long time. That night, he didn't go home. He parked on the edge of the ridge road, engine off, window cracked. He wanted to hear it again, to know for sure. And just after midnight, the forest answered. That same skitter, faint at first, then closer. He killed the light and waited. The sound came up the gravel, slow and deliberate, like it was pacing him. Then another joined it, softer, lighter. Then a third. He sat there, breathing through his teeth, until he realized it wasn't circling the truck this time. It was coming straight for the window. He says he doesn't go into the woods anymore, not even in daylight. The forest feels different now, like it's waiting. The silence hits in patches, sudden and heavy, same way it did that night. And sometimes, late at night by the lake, he still hears it, that faint, uneven skitter. He keeps telling himself it's a branch sliding against the siding, or an animal under the porch. But the sound always stops when he listens too close. The lights flicker, the air tightens, and that dry, papery smell drifts through again. He never saw it again, not clearly. Just shapes in the fog sometimes. Too tall to be deer, too smooth to be human. He's not sure anymore if it's real or if his mind kept a piece of it. But every time the crickets go quiet, he feels that same cold crawl under his skin, the one that whispers that some things don't leave the forest when you do. And if you're ever out there alone and the woods suddenly forget how to make noise, don't look for what's missing, because it might already be standing still, waiting for you to notice. It was just another patrol, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. By then, I'd been deployed for about 7 months in Appalachia, Iraq, and we'd done this drill too many times to count. Same dry, dusty roads, same beat-up buildings, and the same wary looks from locals watching us from doorways, with that mix of curiosity and caution. Most days, it was just about putting one foot in front of the other, trying not to think too much, keeping that steady, half-alert, half-numb state that stops you from losing it. We were on a standard patrol through a small village outside the main base, assigned to check in with some locals and confirm everything was quiet. There were 6 of us in the squad, moving in formation. My buddy Ramirez was a step behind me, and we both had our eyes scanning the dusty road ahead. We walked past a few empty market stalls, past some locals hanging back against the walls, watching us with a silent wariness that seemed sharper than usual. The whole area was quiet, too quiet, but quiet was often just part of the landscape. Our Sergeant Miller led up front, scanning the area before pointing us toward a narrow alley between 2 buildings. It was tight, just wide enough for 2 to walk shoulder to shoulder, but we'd been down alleys like this before. The sun was brutal that day, bouncing off the cracked stone walls, and the air was thick with dust, almost hard to breathe. As we rounded a corner, something shiny caught my eye, a small, dull piece of metal lying in the dirt. I thought it was part of an old tool or maybe a bit of trash, but then my radio crackled to life. It was the comms guy back at base. He'd picked up some chatter about movement near our location, but the details were thin. Not unusual, so I just gave Ramirez a quick nod, and we moved on. A few minutes later, there was a faint noise from the far end of the alley, a low shuffling sound like something scraping against the stone. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Ramirez caught my eye, his face tense, and I could tell he'd heard it too. Miller held up a fist signaling us to hold, and crept forward a few paces, scanning the shadows. Suddenly, he froze. His hand shot out, telling us to pull back. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure just beyond the reach of the light, barely more than a shape slipping between the walls. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe one of the locals keeping out of sight, but the movement was all wrong, too fluid, almost like it was gliding rather than walking. Miller whispered into the radio, low and urgent, saying we had possible contacts up ahead. The rest of us dropped into a crouch, tense, waiting, listening. My heart was hammering, but I tried to keep my breathing steady, reminding myself we'd done this before. But this time, something felt off. There was no noise, no scurrying, just a deep, thick silence. Miller signaled for Ramirez and me to take the left flank, and we started inching along the wall, moving forward. The alley split into 2 narrow paths, shadows pooling in every crevice. I glanced left and right, eyes straining to catch anything that seemed out of place. That's when I saw it again, a dark figure slipping from one shadow to the next, quick and smooth, almost like it was blending with the darkness itself. I couldn't make out any details, just a mass that was too large and too unnatural to be one of the locals. I whispered out, trying the local language, telling whoever was there to step out slowly, hands raised. No response, just that same heavy silence. Then there was a metallic clank, faint but deliberate, somewhere deeper down the alley. Miller ordered us to fall back, but before we could move, there was a flash of heat and light, a blast that threw me backward, slamming me into the wall. I came to with my head spinning, vision blurred. When I blinked, I saw that I'd been thrown 10 feet or so from where I'd been standing. Ramirez lay a few feet away, groaning, while Miller was back on his feet shouting, though his voice sounded muffled and far away. I scrambled to my feet half dazed, but training kicked in, and soon we were regrouping, getting everyone accounted for. Ramirez had hurt his arm. One of the others had taken some shrapnel, but nothing too serious. We were trying to get our bearings when that same unusual scraping sound cut through the haze. A faint dragging click that seemed to echo from every direction. I gripped my weapon tighter, squinting down the alley, my gut twisted with a strange fear I couldn't place. Ramirez muttered something under his breath, his gaze fixed on the shadows ahead. We were both very aware that this was not normal at all. Then, out of the dust, a figure slowly emerged. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, a dark shape that seemed almost liquid, like it was made of smoke, yet solid enough to cast a faint, twisted shadow on the ground. The figure stood hunched, too tall and too thin, with long jointed limbs that seemed to stretch out from its body at impossible angles. It had no face, just a smooth, dark surface, but I could feel it watching us, its attention pinning me down like a weight. It took a step forward, each movement silent and unnatural, its limbs flexing and bending like it was searching for something, its arms stretching out toward us. Ramirez was frozen, wide-eyed, gripping his weapon so tight his knuckles turned white. I tried to pull him back, but I couldn't look away. I watched as the figure leaned in closer, and I could hear a faint, low hum vibrating in the air around it, like a swarm of bees or distant static. Suddenly, the figure let out a sound, a faint rasping noise like something scraping metal. The noise grew, a chittering that seemed to echo around us, coming from everywhere at once. Miller was shouting at us to move, but my legs felt rooted in place. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The figure's limbs began to twist and extend, stretching toward us, and I could feel a strange, icy numbness creeping over my skin, spreading from where its shadow touched. Finally, Miller yanked me back, snapping me out of it. I stumbled, grabbing Ramirez, and we scrambled back down the alley as fast as we could, not looking back. I heard that chittering noise rising behind us, felt the icy presence creeping closer, but we just kept moving, practically dragging each other until we finally reached the open street. We didn't stop until we were back at base. No one said a word, each of us lost in our thoughts, the fear still twisting in our guts. That night, lying in my bunk, I couldn't shake the image of that thing, the way it moved, the sound it made, that suffocating cold. I don't know what we saw or what it wanted, but I know one thing: it was watching us. And I can still feel that dark, quiet gaze in the back of my mind, waiting for me to look back. It's something I'll never forget, and something that I don't tell many people about. Thank God for Miller and Ramirez, or I don't think I'd be able to think straight these days. Thoughts of what that thing was have still not left my head. It happened on a Friday evening in late October in northeastern Pennsylvania. Shelby had been on a late-season mushroom foraging trip, something she picked up during the pandemic when getting out into the woods was about the only thing that felt normal. She'd driven about an hour to a state park she'd heard was good for finding chanterelles, and had parked her car in a small gravel lot near the edge of a forest trail. The plan was simple: one last haul for the year, just enough to make a big pot of mushroom soup to bring to her friend's Halloween party that weekend. Shelby loved mushroom hunting. She found it calming, like a treasure hunt, but with a bonus of fresh air and exercise. She didn't stray far off the trail, just poking around where the underbrush wasn't too thick, and always making sure she could see the way back. As the sun sank lower, she realized she hadn't found much. A few shriveled chanterelles and a lot of soggy leaves. But then, around a bend in the trail, she spotted a beautiful patch of hen-of-the-woods mushrooms sprouting at the base of an old oak. Jackpot. She crouched down, carefully clipping away clusters and placing them in her basket, when she heard it, a low shaking sound from somewhere nearby. Shelby stopped instantly, her hand hovering over the mushroom. It sounded like an animal, but not like anything she'd ever heard in the woods. It was deep, rough, and almost croaky. A sick feeling stirred in her stomach. She listened for a moment, thinking maybe it was a bear on its way through, but the sound came again. Shelby stood up slowly, scanning the darkening forest around her. She couldn't see anything. Her eyes darted between the trees, trying to spot the source of the sound, and then she saw it. Something large and dark shifting in the underbrush just beyond the trail. At first, she thought it was a person because it had a tall, upright shape. But as it came closer, the shape became clearer, and Shelby realized this was no person. The creature was standing on two legs, but the legs were wrong, bent at strange angles, covered in what looked like fur and dark scales. A very strange combination that confused her completely. It had long, spindly arms that hung low, almost to its knees, and its skin, wherever she could see it between the patches of fur, looked slick and slimy. It almost reminded her of an amphibian, but in the shape of a twisted human figure. The creature's head tilted as it locked eyes with her, or where its eyes should have been. She couldn't see actual eyes, just dark, empty sockets that seemed to sink into its skull. It let out another croak, louder this time, a sound that seemed to vibrate in her chest and echoed through the trees. Shelby felt her heart hammering against her ribcage, every instinct screaming at her to run, but she couldn't move, pinned in place by the sheer shock of what she was seeing. The creature took a step forward, and Shelby finally snapped out of her daze. She took a step back, then another, clutching her basket so hard her knuckles turned white. She started moving faster, trying to put distance between her and whatever this thing was. But it followed slowly, its gaze fixed on her. Its limbs moved awkwardly, stretching and bending in unnatural ways as it picked its way through the forest. She turned and started walking faster, not wanting to break into a full sprint in case it triggered the creature to chase. But as she rounded the next bend, she risked a look back, only to see it still there, lurching forward, its mouth, if that slit was a mouth, open in a horrible rasping croak. Shelby's pace quickened into a jog, and the creature did the same, matching her speed, moving with a strange loping gait that made her skin crawl. Shelby's mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Her car was about a half-mile back, but the creature was closer now, gaining on her with each awkward, uneven step. She dropped her basket, the mushrooms scattering across the trail, but didn't dare look back. She broke into a full run, her feet pounding against the packed earth as she tried to put as much distance as she could between herself and the thing behind her. Finally, she could see the break in the trees that marked the edge of the parking lot. She sprinted toward it, adrenaline pushing her forward, ignoring the stitch in her side and the burning in her lungs. She dared one last glance over her shoulder and froze. The creature had stopped, standing just at the edge of the tree line, as if it couldn't or wouldn't leave the cover of the forest. It watched her, motionless, its hollow eyes fixed on her, and for a moment she could swear she saw it smile, a twisted, lipless grin that stretched too wide, too far. Shelby didn't wait to see if it would come closer. She bolted to her car, fumbled with her keys, and practically threw herself inside, locking the doors with shaky fingers. She sat there catching her breath, heart still pounding, staring at the trees. But the creature was gone, melted back into the shadows like it had never been there. She didn't waste any more time. She threw the car in reverse and sped out of the lot, her tires kicking up gravel as she drove back toward town. When she finally got home, she sat in her driveway for a long time, just trying to process what had happened. Part of her wondered if she'd imagined it, if it was some trick of the fading light and her own overactive imagination. But when she looked down at her hands, she saw bits of forest dirt and tiny wet fragments of mushrooms scattered across her palms, a reminder that what she'd seen, whatever it was, had been real. She hasn't been mushroom hunting since. The woods don't feel like they used to, like a calm retreat from the world. Instead, they're full of shadows, places where things might be lurking, watching, waiting. And every time she drives by that park, she feels that prickling on the back of her neck, like something is still there, hiding just out of sight, waiting for her to come back. That summer day in 2016 has stayed with me, haunting me in ways I can't explain. At the time, I just thought it would be a fun nostalgia trip, something to bring me back to simpler days. Days when my cousin and I were fearless, crashing through the underbrush without a care in the world. But what we stumbled on that afternoon changed something in me. It shook me out of that casual bravery I'd felt since childhood, the kind you don't question because you don't think there's anything out there to fear. We started our walk in good spirits. We were just two 17-year-olds living in Michigan, poking fun at each other, arguing over which trails led where. The place looked overgrown but familiar, almost comforting. The trees, the earthy smell of decaying leaves, and that distinct quiet that fills a forest. All of it felt like a forgotten piece of my past. As we walked, the woods seemed darker than I remembered though. Shadows slipped between trees, and the breeze had this heavy, stale quality. When we finally reached what we thought was the old fort spot, I remember feeling a strange sense of pride that I'd managed to find it after so many years. There were a few remnants of our structures, a few long branches stacked in a haphazard lean-to, stones piled in rough circles, where we used to pretend we'd have campfires. I almost laughed, thinking of the hours we spent here, making up stories and daring each other to venture further into the woods. Then I noticed the tracks. They weren't subtle, but they also weren't anything I recognized. And as much as I wish I could say I'd left them alone, something pushed me to follow them. Looking back, it was probably foolish, but at that moment, I was only curious. My cousin tried to shrug it off, muttering something about just some weird animal, but I saw him glance at the tracks a few times, trying to figure them out. They were faint but strange, like something big but oddly delicate had moved through, leaving these webbed, hand-like impressions. We moved deeper into the woods, the trail narrowing and twisting. The air grew thicker, and there was this almost electric charge to it, like before a thunderstorm. We hadn't gone much farther before we found ourselves in this small ravine. It was tucked away, almost hidden by a ridge of dense pines and underbrush, and the shadows there were deep, making the light seem grayer somehow. The tracks led straight down into that darkness, and even though my gut told me to turn back, something else urged me forward. Then we heard it, a noise, low, guttural, and layered, like a mix between growls and clicks. My cousin shot me a look that said, maybe it's time we call it a day. But we both knew we wouldn't leave without figuring out what was making that sound. So we stood there listening, trying to understand where it was coming from. It wasn't just one sound either. It was almost like there were several things making it, echoing off the rocks and trees around us. And then, through the tangle of trees, I saw movement, not like an animal darting between trees, but something tall, something that seemed to sway and shift as it moved. It was only a flash, a shadow that slipped between two tree trunks, but I saw enough to know that whatever it wasn't any animal I knew. I don't know if it was fear or adrenaline, but I just couldn't move, couldn't look away. My cousin whispered, "Did you see that?" And I just nodded. We crouched lower, staying as quiet as we could. Then, out of nowhere, one of the figures stepped into the clearing ahead of us. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, with a body that looked wrong, like someone had taken the idea of a human shape and twisted it with something insect-like. Its skin looked hard, almost like armor, and had ridges that reflected what little light filtered down through the trees. I could see these protrusions, almost like whiskers, around a hollow where a face should have been. No eyes, no mouth, just this blank, bizarre head. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as more of them slipped into the clearing, silent and deliberate. There were maybe 5 or 6, each moving in a way that seemed unnatural, fluid but rigid, like their joints didn't work the way ours do. They spread out, forming a loose circle, and started making those sounds again, the guttural clicks and buzzing that reverberated around us. The noise wasn't just loud, it seemed to vibrate in my bones, making my skin prickle. Then, as if on cue, They began moving in sync. The largest one dropped to all fours, rocking back and forth in this spastic, rhythmic way, almost like it was convulsing. The others followed, mirroring its movements with eerie precision. I could barely breathe. I didn't know if we were watching some kind of ritual, communication, or even a territorial display, but it was like nothing I'd ever seen. My cousin gripped my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt, but I barely registered it. I was transfixed, horrified, yet unable to look away. The whole display felt like it built up to something, each creature moving with more intensity, their bodies shuddering as those strange appendages on their backs began to whir and pulse in unison. The buzzing sound grew louder, reaching a pitch that made my teeth ache, like standing too close to a giant engine. Suddenly they froze, the clearing going dead silent. My cousin and I didn't dare move. Then the largest creature raised its head, and I swear it looked right at us, even though it had no eyes. It let out this piercing shriek, unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was pure raw sound that felt like it was tearing through my head, and the other creatures joined in, each one adding its own variation until it was this cacophony of nightmare sounds. That was it. My cousin tugged me hard, breaking me out of my trance, and we scrambled back the way we came, not even bothering to look back. I can't say how far or how fast we ran, but I know it was the most terrified I've ever been in my life. By the time we finally stopped, I could barely catch my breath, and my legs felt like jelly. I glanced over at my cousin, who was as pale as I felt, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, too stunned to speak. We never told anyone what we saw. Part of it was fear that no one would believe us, but there was something else too, a sense that talking about it would somehow make it more real, give it power. I still think about those creatures though, about what they were doing out there, why we'd never heard of them before, and whether they'd been watching us as we stumbled upon their hidden space. Sometimes late at night, I still hear that buzzing sound, feel that weight pressing in the darkness, and I can almost see those strange, ridged forms shifting in the shadows. I haven't been back to those woods, and I doubt I ever will. Whatever those things were, they were nothing like anything I'd ever known. And whatever they were doing out there, I'm just glad we made it out before they decided to involve us.